After the bloody repressions of the 1930s and even more destructive war with Nazis, most of the leadership of all Christian communities was either dead or in the gulags. By the end of the war, Stalin turned to religious communities for ideological support of the exhausted population. He first restored the Russian Orthodox Church and authorized the election of the new patriarch. In 1944, he authorized an Evangelical Protestant Union, for which the Church of Evangelical Christians merged with the Baptist Church. In 1946, Seventh-day Adventists could also register a union. On the one hand, for the first time since the 1920s, Christian communities, especially Protestants, were recognized and affirmed on the highest level of power. On the other hand, they were only allowed to register and worship by the rules and under the total control of the state. There were special departments established, the Council for the Affairs of the Russian Orthodox Church and the Council for the Affairs of Religious Cults. In 1965 they would merge into one council. The councils were controlled by the KGB, and their main function was to ensure loyalty and state interests within the Christian groups. The state-controlled unions and largely anti-religious legislature and propaganda forced the legal communities to make many concessions to the state. Both churches merged into a new Baptist union had to give up many of their ecclesiological principles, including, for instance, the autonomy of the local congregation to elect a pastor and to manage its own finances. Now there was a strict bureaucratic hierarchy centered in Moscow and controlled on all levels by the state. Even worse, when Nikita Khrushchev started his anti-religious campaign, he enforced the already existing anti-religious legislature. Now the churches could not engage in missionary work and evangelism, baptize people younger than 30, have religious education for children, and even allow children to attend church services. For that, churches appointed a special minister who stood by the door and did not allow the children in. In 1961, a significant part of the Baptist community split from the union and refused to comply with the anti-Christian legislature, including the state registration of the local congregations. They went underground and immediately faced persecutions. Another notable underground community was Pentecostals. Never recognized by the state for their American roots and ecstatic worship practices, they initially tried to join the Baptist Union. Yet, due to irreconcilable differences in theology, Baptists didn't allow speaking in tongues in their churches. They soon left and went underground. The Khrushchev's year in power are known as the Thaw, when Stalin's totalitarian nightmare was dismantled and many liberal reforms were initiated. However, while Stalin's repressions physically destroyed most of the Christian leadership, Khrushchev, with his anti-religious campaign, targeted certain communities directly. Most of all, the underground rebellious Baptists and Pentecostals. Their leaders were put in prison for long times. The houses where the underground services were conducted were bulldozed to the ground. Children were taken away from parents. Believers were widely discriminated and intimidated. The evangelical response to that was unprecedented and powerful. Apart from conspiration and congregating in secure locations, they established a wide network of a dissident activity. Underground printeries, journals, and secret hideouts for their leaders. They actively petitioned the state authorities to protest the discrimination and prison sentences for their fellow believers. In cooperation with foreign churches and NGOs, the Soviet believers received smuggled Bibles and religious literature and sent back letters describing their situation, oftentimes with photo and video materials. Congregations consolidated around the families of their imprisoned brothers and sisters and provided for them as much as they could. The Baptist children of prisoners always had a shelter, food, basic clothes, and school utensils. The most formidable was the Council of the Relatives of Prisoners, founded by wives and mothers of incarcerated Baptist leaders. They were writing petitions, coordinating family support, and publishing a regular bulletin for the congregations where they listed all details about prisoners and their home addresses to send help to their families. In 1965, the delegation of underground Baptists managed to have a meeting with the de jure head of the state, Anastas Mikoyan. They provided him with materials documenting the discrimination and harassment of believers, and he promised to take them under serious consideration. However, next year he would lose his powerful position and the Baptist efforts were in vain. In May 1966, about 500 Baptists gathered next to the building of the Poetry Central Committee to protest. They came by different means, by buses, trains, or cars, to not be intercepted by the police. They started singing hymns and praying publicly, but soon after, the police and KGB units arrived, beat many of them up, and took them away in buses. Most were sentenced to fines or 15 days in jail, but the leaders got real prison sentences. In the 1970s, during the Jewish immigration campaign in the Soviet Union, many Pentecostals tried to claim their rights to leave the country. They could not claim any legal ground and were repeatedly denied. Only 2 families, however, managed to leave after spending 5 years in the United States Embassy in Moscow and much negotiation between the diplomats of both countries. The Khrushchev's successor, Leonid Brezhnev, did not continue the anti-religious campaign. However, all the legislature and its enforcement remained in place, and the underground evangelicals continued their struggle for survival, freedom, and worship until the liberalization of religious policy during the Gorbachev's perestroika in the mid-1980s. Please like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. I see you all next time.